In this video, you will probably see me more frustrated than I've ever been with this series, and I honestly have no idea how people actually feel about this arc as a whole. I really liked the first part I had to cover last week, but this week, I had to cover some tedious chapters, and from that, emerged something I don't think I like, and figured it would make for an interesting video to analyze. Apart from the great Sakura debate, I think I've been pretty positive about this series, but today it's time to switch things up and chit-chat about something that really bothered me, bored me, and frustrated me in this section. So, let's brace ourselves and get out some popcorn, because I'm totally not Mark, and this is my continued review of the Shinobi War arc. Okay, so over the last half a year, I've been reading the Naruto manga for the very first time, and bar a few instances, I've honestly been having a really good experience. The beginning was a little slow, but once we got to the Chunin exams, things really stepped into high gear as we were introduced to a deep cast of characters, all of which had something to offer the story, from Neji to Rock Lee, from Hinata to Shikamaru, and as time marched onward and more vicious adversaries appeared and disappeared, I found myself really getting into this series. Even after the time skip where a lot of people told me I would start to lose interest, I still found myself very much invested in almost all of the scenes I was engaging with. Until this week. This week challenged me in a way that I haven't been challenged by a series in quite some time, and it's not a good thing. As a reviewer, I never want to find myself in a scenario where I have to force my way through something in order to get it consumed for the purposes of a review. That doesn't make for a good review, and it's unfair to the series I'm reading too. If I'm not in the right mindset for a long story like this, then even when stuff I would otherwise enjoy prop up, I'm less likely to be charitable to it and give it the attention it deserves when I'm in the wrong frame of mind. In order to prevent this from happening, I take breaks during my day to walk my dogs, spend some time with my family, and do some chores I'd otherwise have to do in the evening time, all in an effort to make sure I'm receiving this material as best I can. And thankfully, I've never had to do this excessively. This is all to say that I am aware that there are millions of fans of this section of the story, no doubt, and while I still really liked a lot of the ideas and scenes in this section, I found it to be one of the most boring narratively to get through. And honestly, it's for a number of complicated reasons, but it all boils down to something under the umbrella of this arc's use of flashbacks. Now, I need to make something perfectly clear here before I explain, because it's a lot more complicated than just, quote, flashbacks bad. Flashbacks are a terrific narrative tool, and just because a story uses a ton of flashbacks in its chapter's creation doesn't by default make it an ill-conceived narrative creation. However, I will say the effectiveness of flashbacks heavily depends on how they are applied within a story. So again, for the people in the back of the room, flashbacks aren't the problem in isolation here. My issues lie more with how they are being used by Kishimoto in this arc. Within stories like One Piece, Berserk, and even Naruto itself on a number of occasions, flashbacks have been the backbone to many iconic and terrific scenes. Itachi's impending conflict with his brother Sasuke was a confrontation built on the back of this particular flashback mechanic, without which the result would be far less impressive or impactful. Within that same dynamic, Kishimoto also used the limited perspective of Sasuke to misdirect us, the audience, through flashback to make the climax all the more effective once we did eventually see Itachi's perspective. And it worked brilliantly, I thought. It is through understanding and appreciating the flashback for the good that it does within a story which highlights, I think, the drawbacks to using it flippantly, or worse again, as a narrative crutch. I'm talking specifically about the differences between a flashback that's used to enhance a scene versus one that is needed for a scene to work at all. And fittingly, there are examples of both in these first 3 volumes of the arc. So, to better illustrate my point and to prove that I'm not just hating here are some instances from this section where I really like the application of flashbacks before we get into the problems I have with it. Naruto's training. While Naruto is all but absent from volumes 55 and 56, he does appear quite a lot in volumes 54 and 57, within which we get to see his training under Killer Bee to help control his Biju powers, more specifically to learn the Biju Bomb, which, as it happens, is performed near identical fashion to the Rasengan, the very technique his father had and that Jiraiya helped to teach him. There are callbacks to the past in this sequence which help to tie something new, the Biju Bomb, to something emotionally resonant from the past which had already been previously established. It helps to heighten the sense of emotional weight in the story while also serving to remind us of something we could have conceivably known prior. In other words, the flashback enhanced the moment, it did not define the moment. Later in the story, Naruto is cut off from investigating the chakra he sensed outside by Iruka and others. Iruka is trying to carry out what his superiors have tasked him to do, to keep Naruto on the island. But in that moment, Naruto senses the outside world and all the suffering taking place seemingly outside of his control. It's then Kishimoto uses flashbacks in a way that I really liked, flashing back to something that we have seen before, Naruto's final confrontation with Nagato, wherein he laments and muses over the futility of war and how it perpetuates the cycle of pain, violence, and suffering in the world. And in response to Iruka's request to stay put, with the promises Naruto made to Nagato echoing in his ears, Naruto says, "I can stop this." The presence of this flashback enhances the scene's punchline, but it doesn't depend on it. And because of that, it not only helps the story feel grand and complex, but it also serves to focus or recontextualize the point of view Naruto already has for us in this moment. Further enhanced by yet more brief dips into the past showing Iruka's thought process, with the note he leaves Naruto after he powers out of their grasp, speaking to their relationship. This is brilliant and heartfelt storytelling. It is exactly why I love Naruto. Zabuza and Haku. Zabuza and Haku's return to the pages of this manga off the back of their resurrection courtesy of Kabuto is exactly what practically all of these fights should have been in my eyes. It feels like there are dozens of fights that take place in this arc, very few of which I actually cared about, but this was one I very much found not only enjoyable but powerful. With them begging to be put out of their misery to Kakashi, they slowly lose themselves as pawns yet again to the elites that control them, zombies to the violent world they've been forced in many ways to participate in, continuing the cycle of violence and suffering that Nagato spoke of and that Naruto is currently trying to stop. Despite being very early established characters with little screen time, they end up painting a clear picture of precisely the world our heroes in this story are trying to change. Regarding flashbacks, however, there's only minor pieces of exposition, of which there are some minor pieces to remind us who these people are in case we've forgotten. It doesn't distract from or bloat their presence at all. Asuma versus Ino Shikamaru and Choji. This is another fight I enjoyed part of, but then started to see a pattern emerge. An obvious pattern that slowly devolved into a tedious nightmare for me. Okay, I'm being a little hyperbolic, but it's all just for good fun, and it's a comic after all, come on. Ino Shikamaru and Choji's efforts against Asuma are some of the most emotional out of all the conflicts that take place here for me. The struggles that each member deals with are the clear highlights that further speak to the themes of generational inheritance Shikamaru spoke of a while back in the story. The next generation is taking over and accepting their new position as legends in their own right by taking down the current legends or legends of the past. Flashbacks are heavy-handed in this scene too. One in particular that works well, I thought, is the flashback to Asuma's parting advice to his students. It's touching and serves to put the scene on a pedestal in my eyes, a powerful, strong moment. Choji struggles to apply himself honestly. Shikamaru has an incredible amount of resolve and conviction in this moment, having the clarity of mind to remind Choji that they are fighting to protect Asuma's child from his now zombified father, that they can't afford to be cowardly in this moment, which sort of bounces off of a line concerning conviction from another fight that I'll touch on slightly more negatively later on, but you know, the quotes from that section are still really good. This is all to say that Kishimoto had some really cool ideas here and executed upon some of them perfectly fine and well in my mind, but my god did I think that this section was a structural nightmarish quagmire that I had to stop reading on countless occasions because I was just so sick of hearing exposition from characters I knew were going to go away in mere chapters, and that's not to even make mention of a particular use of flashbacks he employs here too. Before I begin, I think it's important to state that I don't think Kishimoto is necessarily using flashbacks as a crutch per se, but they're definitely doing a lot of the heavy lifting during these scenes and chapters, over and over again. And I think that's the most important part, making up for a potential lack of personal investment between his audience and the characters, a potential unfamiliarity between his audience and these characters, seeing as they show up very little in the story in meaningful ways, and perhaps a lack of planning or proper structuring for these encounters ahead of time on behalf of Kishimoto. For the better part of 2 volumes, I spent so much time with characters I either didn't know, didn't care about, or with one group did care about, but didn't love the execution of. Kinkaku and Ginkaku, for instance, I have never heard of before, so in order to create a scenario with a satisfying climax to this section, Kishimoto uses a flashback to establish something in the past for these characters to call back to in the end of the fight before they're defeated, to give its ending an air of, I don't know, finality. Otherwise, it would have just felt weird, and using this technique here and there, you know, it's honestly fine. But here's the thing, he uses this exact same technique back to back to back in this arc, it feels like. This drab dude, Durai, I think his name is Durai, has a flashback informing me or reminding me of him and sets up the conclusion to his fight. Mifune versus Hanzo have some nice themes at play with some great quotes that I mentioned before, but ultimately, I do not care about these characters, and again, Kishimoto uses yet more flashbacks to create, quote, satisfying conclusions here for these people. And even during the Asuma fight, which focused on Koji, this is by far the least offensive, by the way, but it still had yet another flashback to something we could have already seen before, but never did. And the fact is that it's there to set up a climax for me that cheapens what was already emotionally resonant without it. And heck, maybe they did talk about the earrings before, but if they did, I honestly couldn't recall, which just makes me wish that these characters had more of a central role in the story because they are compelling. Now, the use of a flashback here, I think in isolation is perfectly fine, but within this twisted, meandering, never-ending conga line of now boring flashbacks, this particular attempt to reach me emotionally absolutely fell flatter than it should, which is, as I said, such a shame because I actually really like Choji. And look, I really wanted to fill this video with more positivity than there ultimately will be here, and there will be positivity for sure in places, but when I was going through my notes for this, let me just say that there were a lot of heated words used. One of the worst things a story can be for me personally is boring. If something is comically bad, at least I can laugh at it and have a good time. Engagement and interest is the most important aspect of this process, and I just didn't get a whole lot of that in this section, unfortunately. With that said, let's press on to something I did like a lot more. At the beginning of volume 57, the story starts to refocus itself on the main characters yet again, thankfully. And Kishimoto says as much in an almost exasperated blurb at the start of the volume 2. As I've said in the past, Eiichiro Oda is fantastic at tying together seemingly disconnected prior encounters to heighten the stakes or emotional weight of a present scene. And while I don't think Kishimoto is comparably strong in that department, he is extremely good at communicating his experiences and feelings through his analog in this story, Naruto. There's this dope one-on-one scene where Naruto gets to meet and converse with the nine-tailed fox spirit yet again. The fox brings up his past with Sasuke, saying that he couldn't even protect him from his own hatred, and yet he thinks he can save everyone from it in the throes of war. And again, this internal conflict with Naruto has been a fun and compelling device to demonstrate the growth of the character throughout this journey. In the beginning, he didn't even want to face him or look at him. He was terrified of it. He tried to feign confidence, and eventually he gave into it before his parents lifted him out on 2 separate occasions. However, this time, Naruto reaffirms that he hasn't failed with Sasuke, because the only way to fail in this instance would be to quit, and he will never quit on his friends, which is a terrific answer brimming with charm and courage for Naruto to say. All the while he looks at his evil self's reflection in the eye of the fox, speaking to his overcoming of his inner demons, indirectly answering the question the fox asked in the first place of his sudden confidence boost. It's a terrific scene, all things considered. Furthermore, on the positive side of things, we get my favorite scene I've covered in this video so far. And while I'm sure many of you will find it quite unremarkable, the very fact it was different from all the other scenes I've seen up until now was enough to sway me in a positive direction. Let that sink in. It was different, and therefore I liked it a lot. Switching gears from the constant fighting and flashbacks, we get this rather intense scene where an imposter posing as Neji appears in the medic tent area alongside the likes of Sakura. It's honestly an interesting ruffle to the story to help add some variety while also giving Sakura more to do, which is awesome. It's a rather simple angle with a lot of consequence that really changes up the formula from a more combat-centric approach to a more thriller-based strategic one. Honestly, I thought this was one of the coolest ideas in the arc so far and very creative. Trying to weed out the spice in their midst really helped to make this battle feel much less shallow than it otherwise had felt up until now. It's a plotline that's completely different and demonstrates front and center the variance and application of the different forms of jutsu.
Among Us! What are you doing?
Do you think we should pick him up? He's got G Fuel.
He's got a knife!
But he's got G Fuel.
And a knife!
I'm sure there's a reason. Hey, buddy. What's with the knife?
It's for, mixing.
Hop in. Hey, he's got G Fuel.
Ah, he's got fucking 2 knives!
The Raikage versus Naruto scene was a really cool initial skirmish to show some of Naruto's abilities in his, I don't know, spirit state. I don't know the name for that, I need to look it up. The nine-tailed chakra form. and furthermore did a great job of reaffirming his convictions and points of view to us as readers, claiming that his father made absolutely no mistakes when he believed in what he, Naruto, was able to do. And just when things are getting good, we get another flashback! This time for Killer Bee. I do like that it demonstrated the relationship between Killer Bee and the Naorai, and I really liked his interaction with Naruto's dad and how that informs his decision at the very end, forcing Naruto to prove himself to him by making him dodge his fastest attack. It really speaks to the phrase, real gold doesn't fear trial by fire, for if Naruto is the savior he espouses to be, then nothing, not even the fastest in the land, could stand in his way, and it doesn't. Look, I'm willing to concede right off the bat that this probably has an explanation that someone much more informed about the series can answer, but when this dude, Inoichi, called upon Naruto for a quick hello, I honestly got confused. Was this something that they were always able to do? Naturally, a level of suspension of disbelief is required, and I had applied that to the legions of people they had been in communication with on the battlefield. In my mind, it was conceivable that they had arranged some sort of frequency or item to be held or something to differentiate them from everyone else. Otherwise, they'd just be able to talk all the time to anyone they wanted, which would be, by extension, make all the times people go missing in the series make a lot less sense. But then he calls up Naruto to fill him in on the plot exposition he needs and pieces out quickly afterwards. While Naruto is conceivably a great distance away, moving at incredibly high speeds, and wasn't part of the military's plan at all beyond staying put in a hole in the ground hiding. Why wasn't this used to try and communicate with Sasuke right after he left? Why wasn't it used whenever Naruto went missing? Or when Sakura went missing? Is it like Dragon Ball when people hide their chi, or in this case chakra, it's like blocking their number from being called? And if that's the case, did Sasuke just not use any chakra for the 3 years he was training? Again, I'm not sure if this is actually an issue or if I'm just missing something. If I am missing something, let me know in the comments down below. Respectively, I really don't know. There must be something I'm missing here that's quite substantial, and I hope someone can clear this up for me because right now it seems really weird. Earlier in the story, we were presented once again with Gaara on the front lines awaiting the arrival of 4 resurrected shinobi, and we were told one of them is Gaara's father. I was excited for Gaara to play a large role in this story given his position and the mystery surrounding his origin still largely unknown to us outside of a flashback here and there. But once we eventually did catch back up with him, we got maybe 2 or 3 chapters exploring his origin with yet more flashbacks, and to be honest, the flashback was inoffensive and worked well enough, but the entire thing felt like it was massively rushed to me. And due to the absurd amount this arc relies on flashbacks to conclude story beats, when I saw the black pages emerge yet again for this section's flashback, I started to roll my eyes, unfortunately. Again, not because flashbacks are bad, but because the way that they are used in this arc now is very tedious. I can predict where things are going to go narratively. It now takes all the suspense out of the occasion and feels like it's Kishimoto's way of expediting the process of telling these minor stories. And it's frustrating because, again, like Choji, I really like Gaara as a character, and a lot of these ideas here seem like they could have been much more effective if presented with a little more pre-planning. Like Rock Lee, Choji, and so many others, I wish I got to see more of Gaara in this series. But we really haven't gotten a chance to see him that much up until now. And so, to make up for that, Kishimoto uses these flashbacks to create this sense of a more detailed and comprehensive backstory to all of these interactions. However, in doing so, this often, it just feels like he's making stuff up on the spot in a haphazard fashion, and I'm sure he isn't. Also, and this is just a minor nitpick, but I just thought it was funny, Chapter 548 is entitled Naruto vs. Itachi. Again, I was excited because that's a pretty impressive title, but 98% of the chapter is about the resolution to Gaara's conflict. Only in the last 2 pages of the chapter do Naruto and Itachi even appear, and in those 2 final pages, they don't even speak to each other. Why call it Naruto versus Itachi? There's nothing about it that remotely shows these 2 in conflict. Okay, rant over, gotta chill. The story surrounding this character does continue somewhat as he contributes greatly in aiding Naruto in the takedown of one of the resurrected Kage, and while I still love Gaara and thought his contributions throughout this arc had some great ideas behind them, I just found the manner with which they were presented to be a little on the predictable, formulaic, and boring side of things, regretfully. Itachi, on the other hand, was the first sign I got that things were turning themselves around in this story, and boy did they. His meeting with Naruto is less about them fighting each other, but more of them coming to understand one another and Itachi feeling comfortable enough to entrust Naruto with his brother. The scene is filled with a lot of cool stuff. I particularly enjoyed the notion that Itachi left a raven as a contingency within Naruto based on what he suspected Sasuke to do after he died. I mean, that's a 4D level chess move if ever I did see one, and totally something I'd expect from someone like Itachi to do. And to that end, I really liked the psychological angle he took when Naruto insisted on shouldering all of this responsibility. However, between this Itachi stuff and the next hype moment, I will say that I wasn't all too enthused or entertained with the numerous cutaways to various different former Kage now resurrected for the purposes of conflict. Titles on their own don't really mean anything to me, and if I don't understand who someone is on any level prior to my meeting them, convincing me to care in the middle of the very battle they were participating in is like trying to convince your date to go out with you while you're in the middle of said date. It's kind of putting the cart before the horse there. That said, I did enjoy the short scene Naruto shares with the Third Raikage's almost impenetrable defenses, cleverly utilizing his own durability and power against himself. It's such a Naruto strategy, blunt but effective, and well paneled too, might I add, by Kishimoto. With all of that said, as we flash from one area of conflict to the next, the pace starts to quicken when the main point of interest arrives. Uchiha Madara arrives on the scene in a resurrected body and decides that it's time to start making things really fun again. I'm serious. From this point on, I pretty much loved everything. It's like the story went from a 4 out of 10 to an 8 in a matter of a couple of chapters, with some of them even reaching as high as 9.5s later in my estimation, and I absolutely will be talking more about that later on. I really liked that this fight, along with many of the others, required Naruto to find a balance in sharing the burden of this battle at hand, particularly within himself. As I've mentioned before, the internal struggle for Naruto contending with the Fox Spirit has been looming in the background of most every dangerous encounter he's engaged with, either as a risk he's needed to contend with or the very cause for that very conflict that's occurring in that moment. The fight with Uchiha Madara has a powerful air to it, the likes of which I haven't felt since Itachi. For some reason, I wasn't really expecting him to prop up in the story like this, but in hindsight, it makes a lot of sense considering what we've seen thus far from this story with all the resurrected warriors. But what makes this fight scene all the more intimidating is the Fox Spirit's willingness to earnestly help Naruto in battle just because he's sort of intimidated by Madara, potentially even fearful. It's absolutely a turning point in the story, and one that elevates the antagonist here in ways that we have never seen before. From this scene, there are a lot of cool moments, obviously. The meteor is a big one that comes to mind, but one that stands out to me is the unification of all 5 Kages in the effort against Madara. And furthermore, I really like how they all sort of had their own roles, with the obvious being Tsunade's healing abilities acting as support and Raikage acting as, I don't know, the muscle. Once this whole thing kicks off and a couple of them fire attacks towards Madara, only for him to be unimpressed and say things like, "It's not even worth absorbing," for him then to get absolutely decked hard by the Raikage, it was massively entertaining and cathartic. It's no longer a battle to protect Naruto, but instead one to protect each other. Villages that were once at each other's throats thanks to a common enemy have gained a sense of solidarity and community, something they wish to now fight for. It's fucking brilliant, and I honestly flipped out with what this led to. The best part of the arc. This is, in my opinion, without question the best part of this arc by a country mile. So much so that it almost completely makes up for the more boring parts I've experienced. In this story, with a truly powerful moment coming by way of Naruto communicating his values and intentions effectively to the spirits he's trying to reach, most specifically to the one that has been a source of torment for him his entire life. At numerous times during this section, I lost my collective shit and could not stop reading. And on top of all of that, from a visual perspective, this is the best the manga has looked in God knows how long. While the Madara stuff was fantastic and very enjoyable, it's in that exact moment from when Naruto's perspective shifts from the 5 Kages that I ended up getting one of the biggest shocks the series has ever given me. He fucking headbutts him straight away. And by the way, this is my new favorite panel from the manga. It's awesome and super surprising with just the right amount of silly. With these two characters having always been separated in some shape or form, to see them clash together so suddenly and unconventionally, it actually got me to recoil in my chair and shout out and draw upon me the watchful, judging eyes of my wife. It's okay, I explained the situation in the story and she patted me on the head before leaving for her mom's. But look at Naruto's expression on this manga page. It's just so kinetic. I love it. Madara reveals that he's someone by the name of Tobi in this scene. Great. And also Nobody. Reaffirming his conviction in achieving his goal of effectively brainwashing the entire world to peace. And with this group of seemingly zombified Jinchuriki carrying out Madara's mission, Bee and Naruto, the only remaining Jinchuriki left, have their backs up against a wall. See what I mean about this section just being awesome? And the artwork revealing this moment in the manga is amazing too. Again, more terrific artwork from Kishimoto and even more surprises that I never saw coming. And naturally, when these two show up to fight against Madara, I lost it again. We've suddenly left all of these fights I never really had any investment in, and now we're finally focusing on some of the most hype moments I've come across in a long while within this series. And something I need to make clear here too, while there are some truly breathtaking moments depicted in this section with regards to its action, this still isn't my favorite part of the material contained in this section. And furthermore, the material that I think is the best has little to do at all with action. The journey of Naruto across this entire story has been about how he himself has been impacted by the circumstances of his own birth. He's been shunned, ostracized, and bullied for effectively being a vessel for something he never accepted in the first place. To Naruto, he was in a horribly unfortunate situation because there was something wrong with him. And when he did eventually find out, I could well imagine there being a level of resentment attached to that too. A profound feeling of, why me? Or, there's this monster inside of me and now I have to pay for it. And to varying degrees, some more extreme than others, this has unfortunately been the case. And on this long and sprawling quest to achieve his dreams, he's also had to search for who he is. Made evident through interactions with Gaara, Nagato, and others, Naruto has expressed that had things developed differently in his life, he could have been consumed by hatred much like these guys could have been too. The fox spirit itself has shown up in the story a great number of times, at first as a monster shocking and scaring the young Naruto, and over the course of his life through misdirection and in some ways taking advantage of the young man's greatest insecurities, this spirit has tried to free himself from the prison by leveraging the hate inside Naruto's psyche. However, thanks to some support from his friends, mentors, and indeed even his parents, Naruto has not only managed to become a well-rounded individual, but one that has managed to overcome his metaphorical inner demon, with only one thing left in his way: his literal inner demon. This arc made a curious choice of adding considerably more opportunities for Kurama, the fox spirit inside Naruto, to characterize himself beyond simply being an antagonistic monster. And truthfully, at first I thought this was a little too fast or premature. However, the necessary precedent for this section had already been laid thanks to Killer Bee and his Biju's relationship. And as the story progresses, we come to learn that much like Naruto, Kurama has, much like all the other Biju, severe trust issues when it comes to dealing with humans. And with good reason. There are some cute references to Dragon Ball and Journey to the West with the Monkey King too, but why this works so effectively is that what convinces Kurama isn't anything Naruto says. Much like everything in his life, it's never been his words that have carried him to where he is today, it's the actions he takes. And in this moment, Naruto proves himself to the fox by freeing his fellow Biju in a selfless effort. However, now in desperate need of chakra, Kurama finally makes the decision that he seemingly never has before. This looked awesome. Holy wow. Okay, so the visual here, I love it. Having spent a considerable amount of time reminiscing over Naruto's life, there's such a wonderful contrast between this, the fox spirit state that he's in currently, and say this weird demon mode that he was in prior. Once a child with something deep inside him scratching and clawing their way out, fighting over his body, and now a freed spirit fighting alongside Naruto in harmony. I'm gonna leave this here for now, but my overall thoughts on this particular choice is that of awe and curiosity. Now that the fox has been freed, does that mean that the endgame here is to eventually release all the Biju back into the wild to live freely again? Or is the endgame going to be something along the lines of what Killer Bee has with his Biju as a standard moving forward? It's strange, and that's not even to make mention of this Madara or Tobi situation. I'll be continuing this story and my coverage of it next week and sharing my impressions then, so please consider subscribing if you don't want to miss it. Until then, I've been Toy Not Mark, and thank you so much for watching.